What do you do when the only thing left of someone you loved is a horse they left behind? The question lived under her ribs like a cold stone. Frost sighed from the eaves when she opened the stable door, and the smell of hay hit her. Sweet, dry, honest. And for a ridiculous second, she expected a voice she had stopped listening for months. The stall was the same size it had always been. Wood darkened by years. A single window rimed with ice. A folded blanket on the shelf. Outside, the field was a white hush. Her boots left short, fragile tracks that the wind tried to blur before she could decide whether to follow them. She moved slowly because fast movements felt indecent, as if rushing could outrun the truth of absence. Her hands did small, necessary things. Tugged the metal latch, smoothed the blanket, checked the water trough with fingers that still remembered how to be practical. There was a rhythm to that carefulness, a thin metronome, and the pony's breath stepped into it. Not loud, not theatrical, just a warm exhale that tasted faintly of molasses and winter apples. She had left a chair in the barn the first night, sat there for hours, a film of cold on the inside of her throat, watching the pony shift weight from foot to foot like a person waiting for news. Its ears flicked to distant sounds and flattened when the wind skated over the field. Its head was a compact, heavy shape, too large for a body the size of a small child's, and when it blinked, the lashes threw little shadows across a brown eye, the color of old tea. It sniffed the air and made a soft, almost embarrassed sound. A polite cross-examination of scent. There was no lightning bolt recognition when they found one another, no cinematic nudge of destiny. The pony smelled her and gave a testing whuffle, as if checking for the presence of a particular hand or piece of clothing. She did not smell like the person who had fed and named it. He had smelled of cedar, pipe smoke, and early morning coffee. She smelled of laundromats and wool, of the small practicalities of living. The pony tilted its head and blew a warm breath against her knuckles. It was a minor, sacred agreement. She learned the pony's timidity in small, humiliating ways. When the first heavy snow came, the pony planted its feet and stared at the white drifts like they were deliberate and personal. It snorted at the sound of a loose tin can, pawed once at the fence post, and shied from sudden movement with the polite outrage of a creature used to routine. It delighted in a scraped carrot more than a chorus of praise. At night, it would press, its muzzle to the stall door, and listen for noises that belonged to the farmhouse, the ones that used to mean someone would come in and call its name by accident. He had told her once, in the old easy way people make true things sound like jokes, that miniature horses keep things in their pockets. He laughed about it, half superstition, half tenderness, and when he said the pony remembered what mattered, she had rolled her eyes. Grief had a practical voice. Grief said measure things in bills and meals. Grief said memories are brittle things, easily broken. But grief had not accounted for the way a living animal could rearrange the furniture of her days just by standing in it. The first contact felt like trespass and reprieve at once. She did not expect the pony to do anything dramatic. It watched her with a kind of patient calculation, as if deciding whether she had the right to make mistakes in its presence. She stuck out her hand, because that is what you do when you want to be allowed near another living thing, a small, unassuming treaty. The pony sniffed and clicked its teeth, a tiny, embarrassed sound. Then it leaned in, not pressing, not demanding, but settling the weight of its head against her palm the way a clock leans against a wall to be trusted. She closed her eyes because there was too much to look at. The wrong angles of light in the Stalls, the way her hands trembled, the way silence had grown in the corners of the house and multiplied. Her knees folded in minutes later, as if the day had become clay, and she had forgotten how to stand. The pony stayed, breathing slow and steady, an insistence that something living could be trusted to remain. Rituals formed not with ceremony, but with the blunt necessity of tasks. She named the pony only inside her head at first, a small, ridiculous word that felt safe in her mouth. She learned its knickers, a worried upward note in distant thunder, a flat, satisfied rasp when hay hit the trough. She learned the exact tilt of its ears when it was curious and the slow blink that meant contentment. It favored a particular fence. Post on the eastern side of the field, a little grove of trees for shade. A patch of grass it returned to even in scrubby winter. It had a blanket it allowed her to fuss with, and would tug lightly at the buckle until she got it right. They walked the field in slow circuits, two shapes matching the measured curve of the land. She spoke in fragments where conversation with people had been too sharp, a soft rehearsal of memories she could trust to the ground. She told it small things she had stopped saying aloud. Apologies to people who could not hear, confessions of cowardice, the trivial jokes that used to fall between them like breadcrumbs. The pony listened without judgment, sometimes flicking an ear when her voice rose. Once, when she recited the last ridiculous thing he had said to her, she could not get the words out, and the pony leaned its head against her hip as if offering punctuation. There were behaviorally sensible things that calmed her practical brain. The pony disliked sudden noises and liked a scraped carrot. It would stamp once before crossing uneven ground and would always circle before lying down, inspecting the world like a small judge. It was picky in predictable ways and reliable in ways that made the math of living easier. If she fed it, it would come the next morning. If she brushed it, it would stand still, leaning its weight into the brush, as if asking for a favor. The tiny exchanges accumulated like coins in a jar, payment in small gestures. Still, there was a thing she could not name, a hesitation in the pony's gaze when the lane sloped toward the woods. Sometimes it would stop, ears pricked, nostrils flaring, as if it smelled something she could not. It would paw the packed earth once, twice, then look back at her with a question lodged beneath its lashes. When she moved toward it, the pony would not balk. It followed her with the careful curiosity of an animal that had learned to keep company with a particular sorrow. She did not know why it followed her the first afternoon she walked to the house. She felt the weight of the decision, the animal's compact chest against her thigh, the soft snuffle at her elbow, like a small, private verdict. When she glanced back, it stood framed in the stable doorway, a smear of brown against the white, snow on its forelock like a careless ornament. She hesitated, absurdly, laughed through a sob, and turned the key in the lock. As the house door closed behind her, the pony shifted and stepped forward. It followed. The weight of that following lay in her like an unanswered question, a note held too long in a song. Why had it stepped out into the cold with her? What did it hope to find on the path between what was gone and whatever came next? She could not know. But for the first time since the world reduced itself to a ledger of losses, something moved that was not counted in columns and numbers. And when she swept the window with her hand and watched its breath fog bright against the pane, she realized she had not been alone in a very long time. The horse followed. She began to notice a map of small, repeated hesitations, the pony's ears pinning at the same bend in the lane, a shiver when she reached into the bottom drawer where he kept a chipped enamel mug, a restless circling of the yard at dusk. At first, she told herself it was wind. Then she told herself it was habit. Habit is an honest liar. It dresses itself in explanation and asks you not to look too close. There were words the pony reacted to, the way some people react to music. Oh, tightening of the eye ridges, a pause between breaths. The name he had heard at breakfast used to be ordinary. Now, when she said it, not with ceremony, but because certain things were now part of the day, the pony's nostrils flared as if the sound carried salt. It would stamp once, slow and deliberate, and angle toward the hedgerow as if a scent were laid like a ribbon along the fence. She noticed because she had to notice. There were fewer things in the world now that required attention, and she did not want to squander the ones that did. Inside the house, she kept the small pieces of him like a laboratory of memory. A single glove with a tear, a whiskey-smelling lighter that had always been cold to her fingers, a camera strap with his initials. She touched them with the guilty curiosity of someone peeking into a life that had been left for her to examine. The pony would come to the kitchen doorway on those mornings, head cocked, as if reading her like a page. Once, when she opened the glove and found the stub of a letter folded into the palm, the pony moved his head so close she felt the tick of his whiskers against her wrist. She tried, for weeks, to keep intimacy at a distance, to build an invisible fence around her own heart. It was an arithmetic she thought she could manage. Love divided by vigilance equals survival. But the pony did not understand arithmetic. It understood proximity and pressure, the small grammar of touch. It had a way of planting itself across the threshold of whatever she tried to protect, like a handful of warm earth refusing to be moved. The breaking came slow and then precise, like the way frost will widen a hairline crack in wood until the plank surrenders. She was browsing through the feed bin, an absent, ritual movement, when its base gave against a hidden hollow in the stall floor. The pony stamped once, 2 times, then pawed with a sharp, impatient motion. Horses will paw at the ground, for many reasons, to clear, to signal impatience, to show discomfort. But this was different. The hoof struck wood, and something small and flat thunked against the inside of the bin. She pried at the rotten plank, because hands know how to pry when something needs to be found. Under the wood lay a folded scrap of paper, browned at the edges. The ink bled in the way letters do when they have wept. There was a name on top in his hurried hand. Below it, a sentence that felt like a plunge. If you ever need to find me, go where the river remembers its bends. The sentence should have been nonsense. It was not. It was a map drawn in the language of the person who used to turn metaphors into facts. The pony pressed its head into her shoulder. Not brusque, not theatrical. Merely weight and warmth, and a sound as regular as breath. She read the line again until the letters blurred into the ivory of the inside of her skull. The world, condensed into the small electric quality of that paper, and something in her unclenched with a sound like glass settling. The ride into that grief was not a dramatic collapse so much as a loosening. Tears came as if they had been waiting for permission. They ran along the tracks of skin and washed the salt away. She sat on a bale of hay and let the weight of his absence fall into the pony's flank. It pressed its face into her hair and inhaled deeply. The simple animal act of being present. Animals do not perform empathy. They offer what they have. Presence. Heat. The map of their body pressed against yours. The pony's breath was a metronome against a chest that had forgotten rhythm. When she finally walked to the river, it was the pony who paced the path like a compass. He trod the same side of the fence posts he had always favored, ears swiveling, nostrils working like twin bellows. They arrived at a bend she had avoided for months, because water smelled of thyme and because the river kept everything it passed. The pony stopped at a fallen willow and began to nose through the damp grass in earnest. Horses will search with their muzzles. They root through scents the way humans root through drawers, with a practical, unsettling single-mindedness. He found, half buried in silt, an old Polaroid wrapped in a scrap of cellophane, his hands smiling back at them from a day when the field had been a different color. She fell to her knees then, not because the photograph revealed anything new, but because the arrival of an artifact worn by weather felt like permission to mourn, and also to keep. The pony stood close, a bulwark against the cold air, and nudged her hand until she touched the photograph. The contact was absurd. The animal did not read faces, but it recognized the weight that lifted when she let herself remember. The weeks that followed were a new kind of work. She began to answer the pony's small hesitations with movement instead of avoidance. When he balked at the hedge, she walked the hedge with him. When he stopped at the bend of the lane, she let him turn back 3 times before she insisted on going forward. Each concession was a bargaining chip, and also a gift. She learned that grief could be negotiated with small, repeated kindnesses. It did not evaporate, but it reshaped itself to fit the contours of a living day. Time slid like sunlight along the wall. The rawness dulled to a bruise that still ached, but no longer consumed. The pony's restlessness tempered into a steady companionship. He stopped flinching at the sound of the mailbox. He learned the rhythm of her mornings. In return, he received the quiet ministrations of being brushed, of feed doled with precise hands, of being tucked in against the wind. He carried her through days that would otherwise have been unwalked. Months later, she found herself smiling at small things she had not expected to greet. The curl of steam from a kettle, the way frost glittered on the fence before the sun claimed it. She began to write again in the afternoons, not as a project, but as a habit, short paragraphs that grew like shoots. She kept the letter, the scrap of paper from the stall, folded in a pocket where she could touch it, like a talisman. Sometimes, late at night, she would put her palm flat against the pony's flank and feel the slow, measured thud of his heart blood. It was steady. It was there. There was one final gift, unpretentious and blunt, like the way the pony delivered everything that mattered. A moment on the edge of dawn when the pony led her, without urging, to the old stone wall behind the orchard. He nosed between the stones until his muzzle found a tight hollow where rain had carved a tiny cave. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a voice recorder he had once used to record the sound of wind. She pressed the button, and his laughter came through, a rough, imperfect thing that made her chest break and refold into something else. It was an ordinary human sound. It was the closure she had not known how to ask for. She cried in a way that was not shameful. The pony stood guard, patient and unembarrassed, letting the storm pass. Then, as if noting that the necessary business of grief had been accomplished, it nudged the recorder toward her palm and bumped its head against her shoulder as if to say, "Keep going." The gesture was practical and utterly affectionate. Some nights now she sits by the window and watches the pony sleep under the low sky. He tucks himself into the earth like a small promise, head over hoof, breath shallow and honest. There are no grand resolutions. Life here is a series of small, salvaged moments, a bowl of stew, a page of prose, a hand on a mane. The wound is, still there, an architecture of absence, but it does not drown the rest of the house. Sometimes she thinks of the first cold morning, the way the pony followed her without being asked. She realizes that she had been living in a ledger and that the pony had shown her another arithmetic. Proximity plus constancy equals return. The truth is simpler than she imagined. The living teach the living how to be, and the small animal taught her to keep breathing even when the breath seemed unnecessary. If this story found you in a place of soreness or gentle repair, then stay. Subscribe, leave a comment, follow, and press the bell icon so you can come back for the next small story that will find its way to you. Watch our daily videos and enjoy. Be here for the next story that just might change your heart.